that bow wave coming off the front of a GT or a bluefin tuna just as they're about to strike the popper. It's very, very visual way of fishing and very addictive. Most parts of the world you will see topwater fishing. Very, very popular style of fishing. In terms of which I prefer in terms of stickbait or popper, they've both got their place. I guess my favourite's definitely stickbaits. I love stickbaits. This would be one of my favourites here. This is a slightly negatively weighted stickbait. So it sits about 3/4 of the body of it under the surface and just a little head here poking out. It's rigged up with a keel weight through here and then also a tail weight. It's got nice flat sides in it, so it's got that nice profile. It's not the rounded style. It's there. It lends itself to, I guess, a slightly softer rod than a typical big chugging face popper rod. But you know, the XOS GT and Doggy, Hamachi XOS GT and Doggy range these are a treat on there. I tend to use the 7'6" fishing off the boats, a 5100 or an 8130. Normally we're chasing quite big fish with it. In terms of hooks, I run typically just big singles, single 7/0, 8/0 in a very heavy inline hook pattern, connected to it with a 300-pound triple wire split ring. So these are great on inshore shallow reefs or areas where you can see the fish already up on the surface. Use them from everything from big bluefin tuna, giant trevally, great on Cubera in the shallow reef areas and things like that. And then look, if you look at poppers, if I'm in a big open area, I guess it's a bit unfamiliar. We can't pick up the bait patterns, or you can't see very specific crevices in the reef. The fish holding areas, if they're not really standing out, whether it be that they're there for the bait or they're there for the structure, then I'll run with poppers, a big chug face popper. This fella's right at the extreme end. This would be about as big as I go. It's got the very deep cup face, as you can see in here. It is, again, tail weighted. My preference is I like weighted between sinking and neutral buoyant, so that they will just sort of sit there. I'm not a huge fan of full floating poppers, mainly because when you get the big bow wave that comes with big fish, whether it be a bluefin or a yellowfin or a giant trevally, as they're pushing through the water, there's the bow wave coming off them, and they'll open up to strike on the lure, and that bow wave will push lightweighted floating stuff out the way. So I prefer really well engineered poppers and stick baits. This here is quite heavy. Offhand, I'd have to put this up around about 6-7 ounces. 6-7 ounces, maybe a little bit heavier, maybe closer to 10 ounces. So it's up around 300 grams. So that is a big heavy popper. That takes a very stiff rod with that big open cup face here, but it makes a hell of a lot of noise and will drag fish up from the deep. But it's not a popper you can cast around all day. Probably most of the time that I've used these has actually been putting them on a teaser line and towing them behind the boat as a teaser to bring up sailfish or marlin or wahoo, mackerel, things like that, more so than actual casting of this. But yeah, if I drop down a few sizes, then the poppers have definitely got their place. Quite a few different styles of poppers and that. Like here, this one here, I would normally upgrade the hooks. This is just a brand new one, so this is before it's been adjusted. So this is a rattling popper. Again, this is cut square on the sides. This is getting closer to what I would call a pencil popper. It's got quite a narrow chugging face here. So these are good for searching. Not as much noise as the big cup face, but they're not bad. Plenty of noise off that one. This fella here, this would be my favourite in the big poppers for chasing GTs, tuna and things of that nature. I even had good sized red bass and that come up and take these. Again, this is just how it comes from the factory. I drop these. A lot of people run trebles. I'm not a fan of trebles on poppers and that. I'll drop them back to a straight single inline hook. This sits up around the 150, 200 gram mark. It's a shallow cup face, but worked properly with rod in the 7'6" upwards sort of size. You will get the good chugging and the noise that goes with it. These will bring the fish up, and there's enough weight there again that this fella sits just under the water with the nose poking up, and it's very hard for the fish to push out the way. This is another one of poppers. Again, I'd remove the trebles off of this. Quite a shallow face here. Another, I guess, indent in the popper here that acts to pop water up and get a bit more of a bubble trail off of it. It's rear weighted, keel weighted, so it'll sit like that in the water and does do the good chugging along. And then you get to these fellas. This one there's got a heavy duty weight in the bottom of it. It'll sit like that in the water. These, I guess, a lot of the time I will run either wooden or foam injection molded with resin over the top. But if I'm going to just use straight plastic injection molded, these fellas here are very, very strong popper. It's got a good wide mouth face on it. They cast well, got reasonable rear weighting, keel weighting, and they will sit there and go along and push the water around. It's just a slightly smaller version. This is probably about as small as I would normally cast. That's around 8 inches. I don't tend to go to poppers too much below that. And same with stick baits. The stick baits about 8 inches and up is where I normally run. This will show you a bit on a couple of styles of rigging stick baits. This is quite a rounded stick bait, so it's not one I would normally use. It's also only got keel weighting here, so it's not ideal in terms of its balance. Casts really well. They cast like a bullet, but in terms of getting the best action out of these for fish, they're not one of my favourite. But this is what I was talking about in terms of an inline hook and then straight 300-pound treble. So that'll sit like that. This here is another style that quite a few anglers like, is a double inline hook and then just a quick zip tie around here. This sits up as it goes through the water, pushes up like this. But my preference is just a single inline hook. You'll lose very few fish off the single inline hook, and you get the opportunity to have a much heavier gauge hook than you will out of treble. So straightening them is not an issue, and for a lot of these fish we're releasing them, particularly your giant Trevally and things like that. So singles are a lot easier to get out of the fish, a lot less damage than a treble. What's my favourite rod? Look, the Hamachi XOS GT and Doggy range, that's what it's built for, is chasing giant Trevally, dogtooth tuna. That's where the series got its name from. Dogtooth, when they're up on the surface, they are awesome fun to target. But the XOS GT and Doggy, they come in sizes from 7'6", 8'2", 9'6", and 10 foot. They're all multi-piece travel rods. You can get them in the ultra cast that'll give you a lot more distance in smaller poppers and stick baits and stuff. They come in a P1 to 2 or a 10 to 20 pound rod, all the way up through to, you can get a 50-130 or an 80-130. Do I personally use 130-pound braid? I fished in areas where you've got very big fish, but generally I prefer the extra casting distance than the extra heavier braid. I tend to run mainly 80-pound braid in the heavier areas, occasionally 100. And just make sure the braid's new is probably the best thing, because the most damage you'll get, particularly chasing giant Trevally, Cubera, things like that, is that they will rub you over the reef. And it doesn't matter whether you've got 130-pound or 80-pound, if it's had a good scratching on the reef, it really needs to be replaced or trimmed. Take that 50 metres of line off and just fish with the remaining part. But yeah, the extra casting distance you will get from 80-pound versus 130, to me it's worth it. I tend to fish a lot of areas where you're fishing in the back of surf breaks and the like, and you're just chasing those big crevices you can see in the back. You'll see the big back of the wave as it arcs up and goes over, and that's the fish are literally living in those crevices in that clean water just behind that surf break. You know, on days where there's decent swell, you don't want the boat in there. You want to be able to cast in there. You also want the ability for the boat to, once you've hooked the fish, turn round and pull the fish out and away from that crevice and away from that reef. And that's, you know, I guess to catching really big giant trevally, there's two things. One's a skilled angler and the other one's a very skilled skipper. You know, sometimes you can get lucky, and you know, a skipper that's not used to targeting those sorts of fish, but yeah, you really want somebody that can read the fish that'll help the angler get it up and out, because they're not clean fighters, giant trevally. They're straight into the reef, and yeah. How do I like to set stuff up? So again, 80-pound braid. Sometimes I'll drop down to 50-pound braid if I really want, particularly shore casting. Shore casting for giant trevally, 50 pounds probably where I go. And then the 5-piece 5130 Hamachi would be my choice rod there. That's a 9'6", or the 5100 and the 10-foot. Just depends which I want. The 9'6", even though it's a little bit shorter, with the right popper or stick bait, actually gets a little bit more distance. So in terms of setting it up from there, I'll run a PR bobbin knot, just so it gets nice, clean, smooth knot that'll go in and out the guide nice and easily when you're casting and also when you're retrieving. And that'll go to typically around 100, 150 pound leader, a hard shell leader. I can't stress hard shell enough. You're dealing with fish that typically knock stuff off of reefs, you know, mussels, oysters, crustaceans. They've got the short teeth in them, a lot of them, and they're designed for grinding things, and they will go through soft shell leader pretty easy. So yeah, that's mine. I most of the time I would be 150-pound leader for giant trevally, tuna and things like that. Obviously the tuna aren't getting down to feeding on oysters off the bottom, but there again, they've got quite a fine tooth, but they can wear through leader too, particularly in a lengthy fight. Oh, what are my favourite? What are the rods whenever I'm travelling I've got to take? A little bit of that comes down to what area I'm going to, but I would normally have if I'm boat fishing, yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Break it down. If I'm just purely going on a trip to go boat fishing, would be a 7'6" PE 2-4 ultra cast in the XOS GT and doggy, and then the 7'6" 8130, because that 8130 has got a very similar tip section to the 5100. They're both nearly identical there in the tip section, so they both run up to a 220 gram popper. Where the difference is the 8130's got a few extra wraps in the butt section there just to beef it up a bit more, or a slightly different tensile carbon. But that 8130, if you really want, you can drop it down to 50 pound. So if you get there and you're only sort of seeing small fish and you want to drop down to 50 pound braid, you can do, and that rod will run it all day long. They would be my two for boat fishing. I also love the 8'2", in the 8130, but yeah, but generally it's a 7'6". 7'6", slightly less cast distance, but if you're running 80-pound line, that gets you away there. 7'6" gives you a bit better control of the fish closer to the boat, because you're dealing with a fairly lengthy rod and big fish that quite happily, you know, they come into the side of the boat, you think you got them done, and then they take off again. So yeah, it's just a bit easier there for that. If I'm doing shore fishing expedition, 9'6". 9'6" P1-2, that ultra cast in the XOS GT and doggy, that's one of my favourite for light tackle. Rig that up with 15 or 20 pound braid. There is if there's sort of slightly bigger fish from the shore there and you don't want to go up to one of the beefy ones, there is also a PE 2 to 4 in that. And that fishes beautifully with 30-pound braid. But both those 9'6" rods, they are the ultra cast series, so they are really designed for decent length casts, and they are great rods. And then, as I mentioned before, the 9'6" 5-piece in the 5130. That's an incredibly versatile rod. Fishes beautifully, very, very sporting rod with 50-pound braid on it. But then, if you really need to stop some big fish, you can drop like an 18,000 size reel on it and fish 100 or higher in the braid if you need. And they've got plenty of casting distance in that 9'6". It's a beautiful rod, and testing me, I can't think off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is that 9'6" will pack down into a suitcase. So you don't even need to take a separate rod tube for that. So you can jump on board with your sort of normal size wheel-on suitcase, one of the checked ones. It won't fit in carry-on, it's not that small. But so if you're traveling overseas and you think you might want to go for a beach fish, not sure, you just put that straight in your suitcase with a reel and you're there, you're set. You've got a very versatile rod capable of catching very big fish. Oh, favourite topwater fish? Oh, wow. Can I say all of them? Wow. Look, I'd love going out to the fads and you'll find mahi-mahi, dolphin fish. They are awesome fun. They're very acrobatic. They're not a dirty fight or anything, but they just keep that visual fishing going the whole fight. So you'll see them come up, hit the popper on or hit the stick bait on the surface, and then their acrobatics, their cartwheels and stuff like that. Just love it. Then obviously giant trevally. I love my giant trevally fishing. They're a fish that's available all the way from Hawaii down through all the Pacific Islands, Palau, off Japan, Palau, then down to South Pacific, into the Great Barrier Reef on Australia, all the way around to Exmouth on the Western Australian side, and then go all the way out across to Seychelles. I think even Madagascar might be getting them across there. They definitely get them across off of, once you get onto the coast of Africa on that side, so places like Mafia Island there, up to Socotra. Coming back across to Oman, fishing southern Oman, Salah, then across to like Sri Lanka, India, down through the Nicobar and Andaman Islands off of Thailand, all through Indonesia. They're great fish, very, very, a lot of people travel from around the world to fish all those destinations for them. And even a 30-pound giant trevally puts up a really good fight. The biggest of them gets up around 100, 120 pound, and they are real beer keg running through the water, and very dirty fighters, very big challenge, awesome fun. What haven't I caught that I'd love to catch? Rooster fish. I would love to get a rooster on topwater. I think they're just a really cool looking fish. Obviously, yeah, go to Central America to chase those. And yeah, naturally, if you're there chasing the rooster, you're gonna chase the Cubera as well. And that's another dirty fighter. That the Cubera Snapper is another sought after fish of the deep. Well, so not so much a fish of the deep there. Where we would normally chase them is quite inshore. But yeah, very challenging fish to catch, good fun to catch. Oh, the tunas. Tunas are a great topwater fish, particularly if you're out in a boat. You can see the birds working, the bait breaking the surface, whether you've done that via a set of binoculars or they're close enough that you can pick them up, or if you happen to be on a boat with a radar, pick them up with a radar. Yeah, they're awesome fun. Oh, look, I know guys that fish off of the UAE and round to Oman, off Muscat and all the way down to southern Oman into Salah and that, chasing the Yellowfin tuna there on surface lures, on poppers and stick baits. What are some of the... oh, look, when you're popper fishing, you do get some surprises. And I guess some of the biggest surprises we've had is, over the years, and I've had it even marlin fishing, is sharks. Sharks seem to take anything from anywhere. And they're a very good way of testing out some of the rods. We've, if you're looking to push an XOS GT and doggy rod, we've got clips on 80-pound braid, and you're leaning into spinner sharks. They carry on the acrobatic fight. We've had those up to a reasonable size. Certainly had whaler sharks up to 200 and 300 pound. They're not, I guess, as hard a fight or as dirty a fight as like a big giant trevally, but they've got the weight behind them, they've got the tail behind them to really push them through the water, and they can really double up a rod and yeah, give you a decent fight for a long time. And it's a hard thing because you don't always see what's taken the popper or the stick bait. It's dived down, and you can't always straight away call it for a shark. So you quite often spend a fair bit of time fighting these. Spinner sharks, fortunately enough, they come up and do the acrobatics out the water and you know what you got. But same with Marcos. But look, I like to keep those on anyway for a bit just to see the action, and also prefer not to cut braid off and have hundreds of meters of that floating around the ocean either. I'd prefer to get the fish ideally or the shark ideally to the side of the boat, and if we can, use a big D hooking pole to get the lure back out of its mouth. If not, just neatly cut the leader off. On all our poppers, I only use mild steel hooks. That way, that will rust away very quickly in the ocean. I won't put stainless on them. You don't need a fish swimming around for years on end with a lure from its mouth. Oh, what do I look for when chasing these sorts of fish from the beach? I guess one of the things I'll do is try and get up to a high vantage point for a start. Whether that be the top of the sand dunes or a cliff or something like that. And I'll look down over the ocean, and what I'm looking for is, I guess, bommies that are fairly close in to the wave break. A nice size sort of turbulent water like what's behind me here. And you're going to look for gutters. You can pick those by sort of seeing where the rips are in the water. So where you're looking at the stirred up sand and everything like that, just come off to the edge of that and you will see what looks like the clean, I guess, more green or blue sort of water off there. That'll be the gutter, the ledge, and that'll be where the fish are holding, that are feeding off the fish coming off the, that are getting caught up in that rip, which is where all the sandy swirled up water is. So I'll fish areas like that. Again, fish around the edges of the bommies. I will look for the cleaner water on the side of the bommie rather than the stirred up water. Or if I'm fishing on the stirred up side, I'll be looking for that clean edge on it. Because the fish are hunting by being camouflaged. They're sitting there and picking off the bait as it comes through. But a lot of that by being up top, or if you happen to have a drone, even better. Send a drone up, have a skim up and down the beach, look for that area, look for that structure. Structure is what holds these fish. And that's whether it be a giant trevally, whether it be a queenfish, Cubera Snapper, rooster fish, the big tailed bluefish, even cob or mulloway as they're called here in Australia. Those sorts of fish, that they will come up and take surface lures, but all of them, sure, they'll move between areas and you may get them on the open flats every now and again, but normally, even on the open flats, it'll be near an edge where a drop off is where a gutter has formed. So look for structure. I cannot impress enough the importance of structure when it comes to any type of fishing, but particularly topwater fishing, because you want to be where the fish are. Look, I will cast, I guess at a bommie, if I'm seeing quite a few areas of structure down a beach spread over, I don't know, half a mile, something like that, then I will give it like a dozen casts at that particular piece of structure, then move on down. Yeah, sure. In between the bits of structure, I will still keep casting, because there can be fish just cruising the edge, moving on to the next bit, following the bait fish. But yeah, where I put the most effort in will be either round a bait school, if I happen to see that, or around the structure. Oh, one of my favourite lures from the shore. Yeah, again, very similar to what I'll run off a boat. I want probably more a neutral buoyant than sinking from the shore. But I want it to be able to sit in the water. I don't want it getting pushed around too much by the surf or the whitewash. And again, I don't want it getting pushed around by the fish. An 8-inch stick bait, like 8, maybe 10. Good narrow profile that's in the stick bait with the rear weighting, the keel weighting. That'll give you the best distance, the least tumble, because you start getting the big cup face poppers. One of the biggest problems you quite often get with them is the tumbling in the cast, and you can wind up with the hooks, particularly if you're running trebles, hooks tangled up in the leader. So, but again, I'll run singles off of the beach for that exact reason, less tangles and things like that. How do I connect to the popper? Generally on the big stuff where I'm chasing big fish, it'll be a 300-pound ball bearing swivel to a 300-pound triple wire split ring, and that will connect into the front of the popper. And then that, straight off the back of that swivel, goes to the wind-on leader. And yeah, I just carry around a set of small split ring pliers to change lures. That way I have absolutely no concern about these fish that'll quite often hit the head of a popper, opening up a clip swivel or anything like that. I would never put a clip swivel direct to a popper. I wouldn't do it to any lure, but it just helps. Look, some people will do a mono leader straight off the head of the stick bait and then up to a swivel. I just prefer the swivel right close to the lure, and then I don't have to worry about it. The only other connection up from there will be a good couple of meters back up, and that'll be the wind-on leader joint, which is a PR bobbin knot or an FG knot, one of those very low profile knots that'll go in and out of the guides nice and easily. The last thing you want is a bulky knot that catches on your guides, either casting out and knocking a ring out, or winding in and you've got the rod loaded and you've got the big knot coming up, and then it gets caught on one of the ring guides. Oh look, if you happen to get a knot caught on a ring guide, point the rod, bow the rod at the fish. And if you've got a fish taking off hard, again, bow the rod. Where do I run strike drag? I will normally preset all my reels to 1/3 breaking strain. So if I'm running 80-pound line, or which is the equivalent of 37 kilo, the drag will be set round about the 12.5 kilo mark. It's not so much of an issue shore fishing. You don't lose a huge amount of line, but if I happen to be out chasing in deep water tuna and stuff like that, and they start peeling off a huge amount of line, particularly with spin reels, because the diameter of that spin reel is reducing so quickly as that line's peeling off, you'll find that drag goes up substantially. And it's not a reflection on the quality of the reel, it's just the pure physics of that diameter reducing. So the drag setting will still be exactly the same, but because you're pulling off a smaller diameter, you can wind up increasing your drag setting up to 100%, or even higher, particularly as you get down towards the bottom end of the spool there. And then the other thing you're dealing with is water drag on that much line, things like that, so be prepared to back it off. But yeah, I find a 30-pound, a 30%, but I find a 30% setting ideal for the drag setting, and particularly on a spin reel. You can always palm the spool and you'll get a good feel for it. And look, if you need to go up beyond where the rod's rated to in terms of drag settings, Just because you've got a big fish, you're looking to stop it, particularly from the shore where you can't go chase it with a boat. Sure, you can walk up and down or run up and down the shore to chase it, but if it's going out and you need to turn it, or turn it before it hits the reef, putting your hand on the spool is the best way to do it. And if you're wanting to really lock it up, hand on the spool and then lower the rod so that you've only got a gentle curve on the rod, you haven't got it overloaded in the rod, and then you can go out to the max drag setting. And if the rod's lowered, you've still got enough of a bend in it, enough of a curve in it that the fish, if it does hard takeoffs, there's still some shock absorbing done by the rod, and then also your leader takes a bit of that shock out. But if you've got a really good quality reel, then jerky drag's not a issue there. So just make sure, and even if you have got a good quality reel, make sure it's serviced up to date and the drag is nice and smooth. In terms of what rods suit what lures, look, there are definitely dedicated stickbait rods and definitely dedicated popper rods. A stickbait rod will typically be a slightly softer tip than the popper rod, particularly if you're throwing around really big, deep cup face poppers. Big, deep cup face poppers, you need a very stiff tip rod for. But in saying that, you can get a stickbait rod designed for like a 10-inch, 200, 220 gram stickbait, like the XOS GT and Doggy 7.6. That if on a day where you're not finding stickbaits are working and you want to switch over to a popper, it'll still do poppers. You just got to go down in the size of poppers and stay with the smaller cup face poppers. It's not a rod to do like that big. The 7'6" 8130 or even the 5100, neither of them are designed for a popper like that. The 8'2" will still take a popper that size, but that is at the extreme end of popping. This is quite a slow moving lure too, but you've got a very deep, very oversized cup face. Yeah, having said that, a rod designed for a stickbait like the 7.6 will quite comfortably work a popper with that sort of, that's roughly 3/4 of an inch diameter, about 20 mil cup face. It's got a bit of a cup in there, but those sorts of rods will still work that, no worries at all. You've still got options there if you're wanting to just take the one rod. And look, most of you'll find most guys, unless the fishing's very, very slow or they're doing lots of searching, most guys will take the time to learn how to use a stickbait and work that really well, because you will get a lot more stickbait fishing. It's really you only really need the big, deep cup face poppers if you're deep water, say trying to drag dogtooth tuna up from the deep, and you need that really huge amount of noise.